nation's capital, America's morning news.
We're at 34 minutes past the hour. It is Donut Day across the United States. Good morning, everybody. I'm John McCaslin.
Good morning, John. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dana Mills. Thanks for your time this morning. Here's what's happening.
I have been looking forward to this interview with Robert Stanley, our extraterrestrial correspondent for America's Morning News, for several weeks now, because I have finished reading his new book, his latest book. The title is Covert Encounters in Washington, D.C. By the way, you can get this at Amazon.com, UnicusMagazine.com. I tell you, Robert, I have got to hand it to you, sir. I read things about my hometown here I never knew about. Good morning, first of all. How are you today?
I'm doing well, John. How are you?
Doing fine. I was born and raised in the city of Alexandria, Virginia, about, 3 miles from Washington, D.C., or the White House as a crow flies, just across the Potomac River. I was born, sir, in 1957 in the city of Alexandria, where I had no idea until reading your book that a human alien of sorts showed up. His name was Val Thor. He showed up in March of 57. He was shuttled from the Pentagon to the White House to meet with Eisenhower and Nixon, then the president and vice president, and he stayed on Earth until 1960. Tell me more about this Val Thor character who was apprehended by the Alexandria police.
Well, he supposedly landed in Alexandria, landed his ship there, and then was taken by the Alexandria police to the Pentagon, where, as you said, he ended up meeting with Eisenhower naturally. It made sense. And Nixon, who was, I think, vice president then.
Yeah, he came running in. Nixon, out of breath at one point, he found out this guy had been they all heard about him. They knew the turmoil that it had been causing within the government. They had him across the river in the Pentagon, and he ran in and he said to this guy, he said, "Sir, we don't know who you are, but let me tell you something. You're causing quite a stir here in the White House."
Yeah, and he asked him if he was involved in the flyovers of 1952 in D.C., which I thought was an interesting question.
Yeah.
So this is all, we can't substantiate this as a fact, John, unfortunately, because the Pentagon doesn't want to admit to, or our U.S. government doesn't want to admit to any of the hundreds of cases of UFO activity and or extraterrestrials infiltrating Washington, D.C. But it's interesting you bring it up because Val Thor looked completely human.
Yeah.
And that's why he was able to live among us, specifically at the request of the president at the Pentagon. I guess he was housed there for a number of years.
Yeah, they put him in a U.S. Army room and kept him there for a while that they made up with a bed and everything else. Allegedly,
but as I reported in the book there's at least one case in the 70s where somebody met with Ford. He landed, I guess, in Georgetown somewhere and then teleported himself directly to the White House. Went inside, met with Gerald Ford for a period of time, and there was another incident that somebody had posted about a person in the Pentagon, a human being who was able to teleport inside one of the secure vaults. So, taken by itself, these stories sound completely insane, but if you put them all together like I did into a tapestry or a timeline, then you start to wonder, is everybody in D.C. like Loopy, or are they actually, not everybody, but hundreds of people over a period of hundreds of years are reporting basically the same thing? It starts to lend credibility to the possibility that this really is going on covertly.
All right, Robert, well, then that leads me, I'm thinking Area 51 and all of this. If there really is something going on, and there has been, wouldn't you think that one person, one whistleblower would have come out at some point and said, I've seen the evidence, I know it exists, there's a huge cover-up, it's time that everybody knows the truth?
That's an interesting question, Dana. When I wrote my first book, Close Encounters on Capitol Hill, I approached John Podesta's PR group because he'd been so vocal. In 2002, he went to the National Press Club, said it's time that we end the secrecy. We've got to come forward. It's the right thing to do, and it's actually the law, which I thought was weird because I didn't know which law he was talking about. But so I approached in 2006. I approached his PR group, Podesta Mattoon, in there in D.C., and they told me, Mr. Rothschild told me, in no uncertain terms, that there was nobody in Washington, D.C. who has an official capacity was going to come on the record
Yeah.
Not just for my book, but just come on the record anytime soon to say that this is really going on. And he said the reason is that person, that individual, will be held publicly accountable for all the secrecy that's gone on previously, and they would also be held publicly accountable for, okay, so now what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, hey Robert, want to get quickly, we've got a new X-Men movie out today, and one has to ask, where are we humans going as a species? Will mankind one day evolve into the X-Men?
If certain people have their way, yes. It's called the transhumanist or transgenics movement, where you blend human and animal DNA or humans and machinery, technology. All of those things all those lines are being blurred. So imagine if you had the hearing capability of a dog, that may genetically be possible, or the strength of an ant, or certain things where your brain could actually process information as fast as a supercomputer compared to just an average person.
Amazing.
So that's all coming. Of course, there's people that are opponents to this. They say it's a violation of God's natural laws or whatever.
Sure. Well,
let's cure the common cold first.
That would be nice.
We will stay tuned for all that. Robert Stanley, pick up his new book, Covert Encounters in Washington, D.C. You're not going to believe the portion where 2 college girls in Washington come upon a car wreck in the city, except nobody's there. Then they wake up a little bit later. I'm telling you, it's a spooky book. Robert Stanley, the E.T. correspondent for America's Morning News, everybody. All right, still to come on the program, speaking of X-Men First Class, Christian Toto, our America's Morning News movie czar, is going to he's going to review that flick for us today.
And wait till you hear how Britain's intelligence agency turned the tables on terrorists with cupcakes.
NBA Finals Game 2, Mavericks 95, the Heat 93, a comeback victory, simply stunning. Stay tuned, everybody. This is where the nation's news breaks.
You're listening to America's Morning News.
The Washington Times Investigative Radio.
For all things news and talk radio, visit trncentral.com.